Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. I hope you're doing well today, friends, and I am glad that you have chosen to join me here on the podcast. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about some reflections that I had on the book, The Founder's Evolution, Conquering the Journey Every Founder Must Face by Scott Ritzheimer. Just want to say that starting things is not for everybody. And thankfully, this world is made up of very different people with very different skill sets. And because of that, there are some of you today that will listen to this and say, this is not for me. However, there will be some of you, I think, that will recognize yourself in this story. I certainly did. I love the quote, "The world will thrive when old men plant trees under which they will never sit." I don't know who said it. But I love that thought that the world is going to thrive when you have old men who are actually doing work that they will never personally benefit from. And the work of starting an organization certainly is one of those things that many times the person who's starting it and actually puts in the blood, sweat, and tears never gets to see the finished product or the full results of their labor. I love going to Hope Sound. And Hope Sound Bible College is an amazing place. And they talk quite a bit about Brother and Sister French there, who came and pioneered a work in the swamps of South Florida long before it was the place that it is today. And they were made of some pretty tough stuff. And most founders, I think, are. They're just a different breed. They're a different kind of person. And that really goes to the first point. He has 7 different factors or levels in a founder's life. But the first one is the dissatisfied employee. They reach a point in their life where they just realize that they are never going to be satisfied as someone who just draws a paycheck working for somebody else and accomplishing their vision. And I think that's important. It's not that founders can't follow. They absolutely must learn to follow. But I think that there reaches a point, if you are really founder material, where you realize that this is not going to work for the long haul, for me to just be an employee at a company. You know, I think organizations are a little bit like buildings. There are times when I like to go camping. I don't necessarily like to be in a building. And so getting out in the great outdoors and smelling the fresh air and all of that, it's beautiful. And, you know, camp, cook over an open fire, all the things that are just so incredibly enjoyable. And it's a little bit like, trekking out into the wilderness and doing your thing. It's a little bit like that when you're starting up something and there's no organization around you. But fast forward 2 weeks and a giant thunderstorm hits. I'm going to be looking for a building. And so I think there are a lot of people that may think they want to start something, but they really want the safety and security that an organization will bring. Knowing that you're going to actually be able to put bacon and eggs on the table every week because you're going to get a regular paycheck. There's something reassuring about that. And so if you're going to be a founder, it's a little bit like camping. You're going to be dissatisfied and decide, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. But very quickly, you are going to enter the next phase, which is startup entrepreneur. And that's where, you're doing the thing that you're passionate about, what it is that made you want to take this leap, take this step. And so you're doing that. And in doing that, there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of really great, fun experience that comes with that. I know for me, when we were first starting out at Victory in those early days, man, it was hard. But I never had more fun in my life, really. And as a 19-year young kid who really had no idea what I was doing and starting out Victory Inner-city Ministries in a park, meeting around picnic benches with homeless neighbors and others, and we were just digging this thing out. We didn't have any any money. We didn't have any backing. We didn't have any organization at the time. The organization came later. In 2001, we got the board of directors and we got the 501c3 and all of that. But at first, it was just me and a little group of friends, and we were out there and we were having the time of our life. And I think in those early days, those become the days that we look back on with great fondness. But it's kind of the good old days syndrome. As you're going through it, it's not so good. And I remember one of the stories from early on. Marcos Garcia came to us from the Institute, the Hispanic Institute in Hope Sound, Florida. And he came straight out of college. I had talked with my friend Sidney Grant and said, hey, we need a Spanish pastor. And so he pitched this to the graduating class there. And Marcos responded, and it felt like that God was leading him to go to Indianapolis. And so he arrived in Indianapolis, and my wife and I weren't even in the country. We were in Haiti at the time, and so I didn't know he was coming. Nothing was communicated, and so he ended up showing up at the Indianapolis airport with no one to pick him up, and happened to see somebody from Florida that happened to be at the airport, and he just went home with them and lived in a little travel trailer on their property until I got back from Haiti. And when I got back from Haiti and heard, oh, by the way, we've got a Spanish pastor, the first question is, what are we going to do with him? We don't have a position. We don't have any money. I'm working at Steak and Shake to try to, finish doing what I'm doing. And then I got hired on at a place called the Progressive Alliance. And so here I am. I'm just trying as a newly married man. We got married in June of 99, and here we are in May of 2000. I've just graduated from college, and now we've gone to Haiti for a few weeks there. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful time, but it was incredibly chaotic. And Marcos didn't understand English, and I didn't have a very good working knowledge of Spanish. And so I remember sitting at our first meeting. We were sitting there at Steak and Shake and trying to communicate in broken Spanish and broken English and trying to get across our point. That, hey, by the way, this is the picture of what you've come to, Marcos. Welcome to Indianapolis. There's no church here for you, but you're welcome to stay, and we'll try to find a better place than the travel trailer where you are currently at. And so what happened was, the first Sunday, we pull up in the park where we're meeting around picnic benches, and I'd walk him over to the picnic bench where there's two Hispanic men sitting who were homeless, who slept out in the back of the park that night, and said, here's your church. Welcome. And that was the beginning for poor brother Marcos. And I remember we had a recording of him. He was over at our house, a little mobile home that we were living in there in Westfield, Indiana, and him saying to me, Pastor Eric is broke. Marcos is broke. Victory Inner-city Ministries is broke. And we were just laughing and having the greatest time reflecting on this reality of where we were at right now. It was a challenging time. And so what we ended up doing for the first year is that I worked out a deal with Union Bible College. He wasn't attending the college, but I asked them if they would be willing to provide a space where he could stay in the boys' dorm. And so my wife worked at the Union Bible College bookstore to pay for Marcos's room and board at Union Bible College boys' dorm, so that we would have a place for him. And we managed to, piece together a little tiny salary of $60 a week. And that was what he was going to have for his walking around money. And we managed to be able to put him on another brother's cell phone plan. And so, he had a phone, but he didn't have any car yet. And finally, we were able to get some money together and help him with a little bit toward a car. And so he had a car and he had a phone, and he's living in the boys' dorm at Union Bible College, paid for by my wife working at the bookstore. And that's how we pieced it together. And that's how these things start. When you're in the startup entrepreneur phase in business, normally you're doing it because you have the dreams of a better life, and we're gonna do our time here in the trenches. But eventually, We're going to emerge, and we're actually going to have some money to work with. But it is incredibly difficult. And it's not the kind of thing where it's like there's a button that says push here to fix. No, there's no cavalry coming. There's no one who's going to rescue you. You have to make it work. And I think that's the place where a lot of people give up. I remember a few years ago, Rick Jones and I were talking about church planting. And one of the questions that we had was, do you get behind the guy that you think has the skill and ability and try to develop him and pump money into what he's doing? Or do you get behind the guy who's already doing it and then come alongside him? Because there's a different group of people there. On the one hand, the first one, you get a hireling. Hey, how much are you going to pay me to go do this? And, if as long as you pay them, they do it. But on the other hand, you have a real church planner who's like, I'm going to go do this whether I get paid or not. I am going to work at Steak and Shake. I'll do whatever I've got to do. I'll drive a school bus and whatever I have to do to butter my bread. But I will plant this church. That's the entrepreneur. That's the one you want. And so I think it's really important that in this phase, you have people who really are entrepreneurs. And whether it's ministry in a church plant sort of situation, or whether it's a business, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears here. And in this phase, if you're going to really push through, you've got to know why you're doing it. There has to be more than just, I think it'd be nice. Maybe I'd like to try that for a little while. No, it's got to be something that's burning in your heart. And I know for me, I was working at the Progressive Alliance, and I'll spare you the details of what that whole situation was like. But while I was working there for a man who was supposedly a Christian, but he was just a snake. Man, he was a snake. And he made all these promises, not just to me, but to lots of people, and didn't deliver, and ended up going bankrupt shortly after I left the company. Left a lot of people with a lot of money lost, and time lost, and energy lost, and it was a real disaster. But while I was there for the 7 or 8 months that I was employed there, he was good to me. And there were some things. Right after my first daughter was born, he gave me 2 weeks off, paid vacation, even though I'd only been there for probably a month and a half. And it was amazing. It was an amazing gift. And he would do things like that, incredibly generous on the one hand, and then just incredibly condescending on the other. And he told me, ministry comes first. When I hired in, if you've got anything ministry related, you let me know, and we will make sure that you get the time off. And so I had a weekend meeting that I was speaking at in Ohio. It was 5 hours away. And so I asked for time off, a half day on Friday and a half day on Monday. That was all. And he denied my request. And so I left as soon as work was over on Friday, and I went and I drove until about 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday night, got back home at 2 and was at work promptly by 7 o'clock the next morning. It was tough, but I did it. And he comes sauntering into the office about 9 o'clock, came into my office, and he said, "How much sleep did you get last night?" And I said, "Not enough." He said, "Well, I don't pay you to come in here and be tired. You need to make sure that you're getting a good night's sleep before you come in here. That's what I'm paying you for." I said, "Yes, sir." And then I said, "Is it possible I could speak to you later today?" He said, "Sure, absolutely." So I went down to his office and I said, "When I first hired on here, you told me that if I needed time off for ministry, that was priority. And I had the time off, and I asked for the time off, and you denied that. And so I did what I had to do. And I got in at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was here by 7. And I was on time, and I did what I said I would do. But, I've been thinking about it, and if that's the way things are going to be, I really don't know that this is the place for me." And he said, "You know what? Life's too short to do things you really don't want to do. If you don't want to be here, resign." And so I did, on the spot, resigned my job without another job to go to. And I walked away from it. I walked away from more money than I'd ever made in my life, from a package with benefits and insurance and all the rest. And I went back to serving tables at Steak and Shake and driving a school bus. But in the middle of all that, there was a passion that had been growing in my heart while I was there at the Progressive Alliance. There was a dissatisfaction. I've got to do something different. I can't do this. I'm not made to do this. And that dissatisfaction brought me to a place where I was willing to take the leap. And I remember as I was walking around the trailer park where we lived and just praying about this and saying, Lord, I want to do this, but Lord, I'm not really sure if this is the right thing to do. I mean, is there a difference between faith and presumption? You know what I mean? Faith, on the one hand, is really just trusting God, believing that God will do what he said he will do. But presumption is just arrogantly and naively trusting yourself and thinking that it's all going to work out. And so as I being presumptuous, I had a wife. I now had a daughter. And was it right of me to just take this flying leap? And so I remember that conversation with God and God saying to me so clearly, Eric, I am providing for you right now. I am providing for you. And as your faith is, so be it unto you. That was a scripture verse that came to me. And he said, if you'll trust me completely, I'll take care of you completely. And if you want to continue to do what you're doing, I'll take care of you that way too. It's your choice. And I remember in that moment feeling like, okay, it's my choice. What am I going to do? And so I took the leap. That was 2002. We shared with a group of friends and family, we're stepping out into ministry. We feel like we should do this full time. And if you're interested in getting behind us and supporting us in that effort, this is how you can do that. And we had already started Victory Inner-city Ministries. We had the 501c3. And so that was our beginning, and had no idea exactly how that was all going to come together and work out. I think that first year, our tax return said that we made all of like $8,500. It was crazy. And we were living so close to the edge. Beans and rice, driving my 1985 Chevy Celebrity with more rust than paint, down to the park and working with folks and taking tip money and putting in the gas tank and buying ham and beans or chicken and rice or whatever else we could afford and sharing that with homeless neighbors and drug addicts and folks straight off the street. But I'm telling you, I was having the time of my life. I would never, if I could go back, choose to go a different direction. I was shaped by those events. And taking my little girl out on the streets with me as we carried her from place to place, home Bible studies, and having people in our home as we moved to Indianapolis. In 2002, we bought a repo, we fixed it up. And that's a whole nother story that I'll tell sometime. But it was amazing. And starting that in that startup entrepreneur phase really led to the next phase that every manager will face, and that is that of the reluctant manager. At some point, you're not going to be doing it by yourself. There's going to be others who are joining you, and normally it's a few more than 2 or 3. That's kind of the early startup phase. But then, you reach a point where it's like you've got to have people if you're going to move forward. And suddenly you find yourself in this place where you're managing people more than just doing the work that you originally started out to do. You're becoming a manager by default. You're like, wait a minute, I thought I quit this. I thought I got out of this. What am I doing here? At that point, you're spending a whole lot more time just trying to manage people than you are doing whatever it is you were passionate about doing. At that point, that's where a lot of founders quit. I don't want to do this. Maybe they sell the business, or maybe they find another way to get out. But the reluctant manager very quickly leads to the disillusioned leader. The early passion and vision is gone. It's still there. It's just buried under piles of stuff. And you're like, I don't know. I've created this monster and now I've got to feed it. And for me, that was 2007. We had started the Stranger Project that kept getting stranger and stranger. And we were trying to start Victory Acres. I had had a prayer retreat in 2005, ended up starting the farm officially in 2006, and so that was up and going, but there were all kinds of lights blinking on the dashboard here at Victory Acres. And meanwhile, I've got the church, and I'm Christian service director at Union Bible College, and I'm trying to help other young leaders that are coming and working with us, and we're doing all kinds of stuff. There's more people than ever before, people with needs, deep needs. I mean, when you don't have AAA, who do you call when you have a flat tire? You call Pastor Eric, obviously. Like, that's the one number that will answer. And so I was jumping and responding to everybody's needs, everybody's except my wife and my little children. And so we had 2 daughters, one on the way, and I was just not in a good place at all. I had reached that place of a disillusioned leader where I was like, why am I doing this again? And I remember getting away, and as I was prayerfully thinking, reflecting, God asking me the question, who asked you to do all this anyway? I was like, well, I thought it was you. I thought this is what you wanted me to do. And I remember as I just laid out in front of him that day, my life, saying, Lord, what do you want me to do? His words to me, and I've shared this with you before on the podcast, but Eric, I just want you to be my child. I just want you to be my child. And it's a lesson I've come back to again and again. But as a disillusioned leader, God led us during that time, during that season, to take a month of prayer and reflection. It was kind of a mini sabbatical of sorts, but it was absolutely revolutionary in our lives. Rochelle's mother had a little trailer out in the country there near Marshfield, Missouri, and we went and we spent 2 weeks there. And then we took a train ride from St. Louis to Chicago and back again. It was kind of a train ride to nowhere. But we, as a family, saw the sights. And then we spent a few days at King's Ranch. It's now called The Springs, but it was a place for people in ministry to get away and rest and reflect. And we spent some time just being together. It wasn't a vacation. It was much more than that. We emerged from that time of prayer and reflection with 4 clear things that God showed us. And one of those things was that I was to go back and resign as pastor. Another thing was that we were to homeschool our children. And one of the third things was that he was going to bring us back home to Victory Acres. As we came back from that time, there was really a transition period where I was moving out as pastor and into this role of executive director of Victory Inner-city Ministries. And Steve Gibson became the pastor at Victory Chapel. And so I was the executive, I was the chief executive. But we had other leaders that were leading, other strong leaders that were leading with opinions and often direction that was different than what it had been earlier. And I was still there, and it was awkward for him, I'm sure. I remember, I was the director, and we would have these retreats. We landed a grant to do strategic planning and be able to fly different places and see other ministries that were doing the same sort of thing. And then we would have these retreats where we would go over our thoughts and what we were doing. And I was the leader of it. And so here I'm laying out these meetings that we're having, a morning meeting and an afternoon meeting and an evening meeting. And yes, we'd have a little time between them to do other things, but for the most part, we're meeting all the time. And I remember the first retreat that we had after I was no longer in charge, and they didn't have one single meeting. They fished the entire time, and I thought, what a colossal waste of time. I was so frosted. I was like, what is this? But it was a reaction to, and probably a needed reaction with time to think and reflect on that now, to my driven type A, let's just get this work done kind of philosophy. And so they were done with that, and probably needed to be. But there was a period there where I was I was the chief executive working in the company, but I was not the main guy anymore. It didn't all hinge on me. And there's two other phases in this founder evolution framework. He calls it the true owner and the visionary founder, which I don't think I've ever actually come to those two phases. But it was in 2009 that our family began to make steps towards moving here to Victory Acres. I remember as I approached the group about it and really left it open to discernment, saying we feel like that maybe God is leading us to move to Victory Acres, but what do you think? And people were against it, and they spoke out very strongly about it. I think it's a bad idea. And one of them said, you're just going to do the same thing there that you've done here, and that is, start a bunch of things and then, get yourself in a spot where you're not going to be able to sustain it. And I don't think it's a good idea. I think you need to stay here. That was in May. But the decision was that we were going to come for the summer. The wisdom was, come, stay in a temporary sort of way for the summer and experience what it would be like to live at Victory Acres. And then we will talk about it again at our fall retreat. And so we did. We came and we lived in an RV and helped out that summer. We had a young man who was here from Indianapolis, and then we had another intern, Ryan Jackson, who was here, and it was an incredible summer, full of hard work and lots of stuff going on. And it was also a time of discernment, as we were back to Indianapolis numerous times, but we were here more than we were there. And I don't think I'll ever forget the feeling at that September retreat. We were gathered at the ICHA campground in Greenfield. And as we brought up the discussion of what about the Heimlich family moving to Victory Acres, Brother Gibson was leading the retreat. And as we went around the room, person after person who had been against us leaving in May now said, you know what, I didn't like this. And I still have reservations about it, but I believe this is what we're supposed to do. I believe God is calling Eric and Rochelle to leave and to move to Victory Acres. And so I'm for it. And to a person, as they went around the room, every person in speaking about it felt like that this was the direction that God wanted for our lives, for our family. And so they laid their hands on us. I still remember that. They surrounded us and laid their hands on us and prayed for us and sent us out. They commissioned us to go and to do the work that we've been doing for the last nearly 15 years. And I remember the feeling that I had as I left Indianapolis. As we loaded up and we're driving out of town that final night that we were leaving. And with tears streaming down my face, there was this sense of joy and pain all at the same time. I think someone said that to be a parent is to have your heart, half your heart, outside your body, walking around for the rest of your life. And it's sort of like that when you start something. You put yourself into it. There's blood, sweat, and tears, but there's also a degree of your personality that goes into the DNA of that organization. There's things that it becomes that are larger than you, that are different than you, but there's a piece of you that's in it. And in the middle of that, you have to let it go. There comes a point where you have to kiss that child goodbye and say, you're on your own. And that's the way it's supposed to be. But there's a degree of pain, of loss that's involved in that. And joy all at the same time. And I remember going back to Indianapolis different times after that. And I said, it's probably the closest thing I'll ever get to feeling like a rock star, getting to come back home to Indianapolis and just the feeling of love and overwhelming acceptance and joy at seeing, the Heinlichs are back again. Man, that was so special. And then there was a period of time in there where decisions were being made and things were being done that it's kind of like when your kids grow up and they do things that you don't agree with, but you're no longer in a place where you can tell them what to do, It's painful. You think, I wish they wouldn't do that. And what are you going to do? Except appeal to them relationally. And so there was a period of time there where, again, people that I love dearly made decisions that are different than what I would have preferred and liked. And so Victory Chapel, my baby, the thing that I started, ceased to be. At least as a weekly worshiping congregation. And the building where we had put a lot of time and energy that we purchased ended up becoming the home of the Hispanic congregation that has grown and thrived and is continuing to develop it. And it's a wonderful, beautiful thing today to see what God is doing through Pastor Eddie and the team that's there. Pastor Eddie's the pastor now. He was a young man who was discipled by Brother Marcos, and at Marcos, after 16 years, handed over the reins of that congregation to that disciple who is now leading a vibrant, viable congregation that's moving forward and developing leaders and doing so many good things. And it is so incredible to see, and I'm thankful for it. But Victory Chapel, the church that I founded, is no longer in existence as a weekly worshiping church. But I was telling Rochelle a while back, it's not there in terms of, a church that you can point to, but it exists today in the ongoing ethos that has permeated the lives of those that were part of it and who've now gone to other places and are bringing that same spirit and vibrancy and the lessons that we learned together to other places. And I told her, I said, the spirit of Victory Chapel is still alive through its people. And it is. I've never seen anything like it. How that an organization that's no longer there can still have such an impact on the thinking of its members in such a way that it's actually influencing other organizations. And I've watched that. And so, in a sense, there's a feeling that maybe through the leavening effect that it has had in other places, it's part of God's sovereign plan and purpose that was bigger than what we were trying to do there in Indianapolis, in one place. It's a little of my story, and I know it's long and rambling, and so maybe none of this has any application for you, but one of the things that I'm learning, and I'm still learning it, is that God has given me the gift of starting things. And I remember in more than one meeting, people saying, your problem, Eric, is that you start things and then you go off and do other things, and somebody has to come along behind you and clean up your mess, pick up the pieces. And they said it in a way that was critical. They meant it that way, I think. But I've come to realize that it's actually a gift. Not everybody has the gift to be a visionary founder, to be someone who can see what isn't and then work in such a way to make it something that is. I remember I used to think everybody had that gift. I thought everybody saw what I saw. It puzzled me when they couldn't see it. I could see it. And I could see it so clearly that it was like it was already there. And I would speak about it like it was there. And I would talk about it and build that picture in other people's minds in such a way that it became. And so to speak of things as if they are that are not, and to be able to galvanize people and begin to bring together resources and make those sorts of things happen is not a skill set that every person has. But there are some that do. And I think there are a lot more that should. Because this world needs businesses and ministries that are solving problems and meeting people. And maybe you're one of those. And so if you find yourself being a dissatisfied employee, there's lots of reasons for that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you should just run out and start something. But if there's a burning in your heart, a passion, a vision for something that's not there yet, that may be a clue. And once you do that, if you reach that point and you're the startup entrepreneur and it's just hard. It's just really hard. And you think, I think I'm just going to go back to the building. I'm just going to go back where there's some safety and security and stability. I get it. But I just want to challenge you. I want to encourage you. Don't give up. Don't give up. And if you've reached that place of reluctant manager and all you feel like you're doing anymore is just managing people, do what Jethro advised Moses to do. Division of labor. Begin to bring people in to that circle of leadership and delegate leadership ability to them in such a way that it doesn't all depend on you. That you don't have people just queuing outside your office door and you just answering their every question. No. Empower other leaders around you to be able to answer those questions. And then elevate to do the things that only you can do. I was talking with a friend this week and asked him that question. What is the list of things that only you can do? Because if you're not doing the things that only you can do, guess what? Other people are not going to be able to do the things where they add the greatest value. And so you got to be very clear about that. What is it that only I can do? And at first, you're the chief everything officer. You're the CEO. You got to do it all. But there reaches a point where as a reluctant manager, you've got people. And you need to remember these people are there because they're competent. And if you fly to the ball every time and don't let them play their position, that's a problem. And so I want to encourage you, if you are a founder, or if you think you're a founder, get the book, Founder's Evolution, read it. Again, it's a great resource. It's been helpful to me. I hope it will be help to you. For Gleaning and Gathering, God bless.